So this sermon has two titles, All In and I Will Follow You, but are we brave enough? The disciples were afraid. Just before Jesus answered him, which is how the reading in John starts, they were asking, how do they do this? How come it was that suddenly they were to be responsible? They were afraid. Jesus was going away and it would be up to them. And we've all had those feelings. We've all worried about a new start, a new school, a new job, new places, new something to do. We've all worried that suddenly we're going to be on our own. We might turn up and no one's going to know us. We might have to do something by ourselves. Even me sometimes standing up here at the front. I have to do it. I'm on my own. But Jesus reassures them. It will be okay. Not necessarily all of the time, but it will be okay. Some of their friends and colleagues will stay true, will gather and support them, and some won't. They won't hear the story, they won't believe it anymore, and they'll drift away. And that's life. That's how our friendships come and go over time. We've all been there. But we all have someone in our corner who is our chief cheerleader. For a long time, for me, it was my mum. You can do it, SJ. You've come a long way. It doesn't matter how bad it's been before. Somehow it will, yeah. Even when she probably knew it wouldn't be okay and that I would have a really bad day, she would still tell me that it would be okay. Right back from when I was little, all the way through, when I was going into exams, even the resits after the failures, it would be okay. But then Jesus does something different. He challenges them. He says, the Holy Spirit will come and teach you, remind you, and challenge you. I will come again, but the words of the parent will speak without me. But also, don't cling to me. Don't hang on to me. Be happy for me as I go to the parent. They had to be all in. And they had to listen to the Holy Spirit that was coming to guide them. They would have to survive without their leader. They've been so accustomed to being led by Jesus that they would have to do their own thing. So I have three questions that come from this. And they're questions for me, so I share them. What is the Holy Spirit reminding me now or teaching me now? What do the words say to me now? And am I clinging to the past rather than walking forward to the future? And I'm pretty sure that I'm guilty of the last one. I'm very good at remembering all the things I've done wrong, all the mistakes I've made, and thinking about all the steps that I've taken to get to where I am, and hiding in that safety that says, I'm comfortable right now. But that's not always good enough. They have to go on, and so do we. Now, most of you will know, if you know me well, that I do not have any interest whatsoever in football. I'm normally much more interested in business and politics, but quite frankly, at the moment, business and politics is just depressing. I've had enough of Donald Trump and certain members of the UK politics who are, exit, stay, whatever, but, I've just had enough. And I don't really care about the police and crime commissioners, which is coming up for election this week. But there have been two football-related stories which managed to get politics off the front pages. After 27 years of fighting for it, the Hillsborough inquest has returned a verdict. It's taken them 2 years to go through all the evidence, but it's the first time they did it. That day, 27 years ago, changed the way that our stadia are built, the way fans are policed, and may yet change the way police look at things in total. I don't think any of the coverage has allowed certain police forces to get off scot-free. But those families fought with courage and conviction. And if you haven't read the stories, I encourage you to read those stories. Not because it's gruesome to read about the deaths, but reading about those families who came together and became friends, people who would never have met each other, but they are united by that day. They could never bring back the people who died, but they could group together and fight. They were all in, and they did. And they've gone to every court in the UK. They went to Europe and back, and they didn't make any progress until they spoke to the politicians on the ground. The group's leaders have changed over the years, and sadly, some have died. But the team formed and went through it, and it did it. They were all in, even when it seemed impossible, even when the press was saying they were wrong, even when the courts denied them. The second is today's Football Cup, whatever it is. You can tell I don't really know much about this. But everyone I know knows who Manchester United is. You do not have to be a football fan to know who Manchester United is, even if all you've ever seen is their logo on merchandise all over the world. And they played a team called Leicester City, which I had never really heard of before. I mean, I assumed that Leicester probably had a football club, but that was about as far as it went. And today, Leicester City drew 1-1 against Manchester United. And they are very close to being able to fight for whatever cup it is. I said it earlier, but I can't remember. They've managed to have conversations about them in the news because they've played well and won against some of the richest clubs in the world. Clubs who can pay no matter what price is set for the players that they have on their teams. So theoretically, they should never have got anywhere near a 1-1 draw against Manchester United. But they were all in together and they followed their leader. They followed the team captain. In this case, it's a human leader. In the disciples' case, they had to follow the Holy Spirit. And it's obviously a lot harder to follow a concept and a vision and something that's not coming to you through a human being that says, let's do this now. And we've all played, or probably played, the follow my leader game as children. But someone in the front has to decide where you're going to go next. And in Paul's case, and in that little band that followed around, Paul was that leader. And he wanted to go east. He wanted to go to Asia. That was much more exciting. It was fashionable. It was where the Romans were going next. It made sense. It was the holiday destination equivalent. Everyone was going east. Europe was boring because that was where the Romans had come from. But God said no. God said, I think you should go to Macedonia. So, and it was a dream. And sometimes dreams really do try and tell us something. Now, I had a dream this week. Some of you know that I work in a risk department. And I dreamt really vividly that I managed to lose my computer. I hope it never happens. But I had a complete nightmare about losing the computer and everything that was on it and all sorts of things. Of course, what do I do the following day? I go in and make sure that my computer is as clean as it possibly can, so that if I do lose it, nothing bad is going to happen. But sometimes your dreams are your subconscious trying to tell you something, or sometimes they are the visions that God casts for us. So Paul decides to follow this weird guy in his dream who says, come to Macedonia. And the group packs up and goes to Europe, and they go west. They got in a boat, and they travelled from the Middle East via Greece to Macedonia. Kind of wouldn't be allowed these days, would it? But, those days, four men in a boat going to Macedonia was fine. They picked Philippi because it was safe. It wasn't a random choice. It was a Roman colony, so they'd know the rules. There was trade, so there are lots of people coming and going, so they're going to meet strange people, and they might go different places. So they had opportunities. It wasn't a place with a established Jewish community. It didn't have a synagogue. So they were not operating under Jewish rules when they got there. But on the Sabbath, this group of Jews and Gentiles, Luke was with them by then, that's why he's writing as we do. And they look for a place to pray and to talk. And they realised that there's a group of Jews who congregate by the river to do just that. And I'm absolutely certain that when Paul set out on his journey, the last place he expected to be was in a group of women discussing theology. Now we all know that that's not normally Paul's place to be, because he was a traditionally conservative Jew. He would have grown up never speaking to any women who were not immediately related to him. Even cousins would have been too far removed for him to have those conversations. If it wasn't a sister or a mother or a servant, he would not have had that conversation. And here he was, talking to a powerful, wealthy Turkish woman. About as far from his normal experience as you can get. And, Lydia was powerful and wealthy. It was her household. She sold purple cloth, which was the most expensive cloth you could get because purple dye was very difficult to make. And she came from a town in Turkey where that is what they did. They made purple cloth and she traded it. So she probably was trading it to that community. But it's that random connection that can change your direction. So Paul went to Macedonia to meet a strange guy who appeared to him in a dream and said, "Come and preach to us." And he ended up meeting Lydia. For me, that strange moment was a Burns Night supper in 2002. When someone said, "Come along and find out about this Burns Night thing," I was like, "Oh, I'll do that." Turned out to be MCC Brighton's first membership class. A lot has changed since then. For Lydia, though, she was baptised. And that's a big deal. Because she'd already converted to Judaism. That's the only reason she would have been in that space talking. So we're talking about a Turkish woman who's converted to Judaism in Macedonia, without a Jewish community. So she really has a thirst for God. But she wasn't quite sure how to channel it. But so was her family. So she got herself baptised, her family, her servants, and probably all of her employees. Because that's how the family would have been described. She was definitely all in for Jesus. There was absolutely no doubt in her mind this was what she was going to do. And Luke thought it was so important that he talked about her a lot. And she managed to persuade Paul, remember this traditional Jewish guy who didn't deal with women, to go and stay in her house. She rerouted Paul's journey and made him stop and stick around in Philippi and talk to her and deal with that. And of course, this is, the church that Paul then writes to in the future. But that human connection between Paul and Lydia in that group of women changed things. So where did we start? We started with some questions about, what are we being asked to do now? And what do the words say to us? And Paul was certainly very brave. He followed Jesus even when it didn't make sense and when it wasn't what he wanted to do. And it's easy to look at that and say, well, he wanted to travel. He was already set to go somewhere. He just went a different direction. He was happy talking to anybody about Jesus. He was a former rabbi. He had experience of talking about religion and theology, and he knew what he was talking about. He had friends and supporters, because he didn't go alone. There were 4 of them or 5 of them that went on this trip. And then we sit and we look at ourselves and we say, I can't do that. I'll be on my own. It's a bit difficult. I like how things are now, or how they were. I'm very good at that. I like things how they are. And that's exactly where we started with the disciples. I don't want it to change. Why are you going away? It's difficult. know all of Paul's history. We do know that he lost and gained companions along the way. This was his first trip with this group because he used to travel with Barnabas. So somewhere along the line, he's not travelling with the same group of people. And I'm sure that no matter how comfortable he felt talking about theology and talking about Jesus, I'm sure he had days when he didn't want to do anything. And he probably had days when he was travelling and it was wet and it was windy and he felt cold and miserable and no one was giving him a place to stay and he thought, oh. But he kept going, just as the disciples were told to do in the reading that we had. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let